was there a time where when you got into it, maybe in the beginning or halfway through or even towards the end, because that was a very interesting time when Hex was hitting all-time highs and going up and up and up. Eventually, as we saw, as the chart shows, it's been going down, 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 and up and down and sideways and all this stuff. Macro conditions, maybe different things going on too. But was there ever a time then where you thought, hey, is this story going to end the way that we thought it was going to end, or is it going to change, or how are we? We still want to tell the story, but was there a time where you needed to like unbias yourself, or like be like, okay, let's maybe get into that a little bit?
Yeah. So I guess one of the things that I would acknowledge is that we entered this as non-biased as we possibly could. So, our biased lens is through the lens of story. But, we had no vested interest in manipulating the story around success or failure, right? One of the things that we would acknowledge as storytellers is that either of the two being more powerful is arguably a stronger story, right? Like that's what's of interest in terms of looking at it from that perspective. And so, as we went along the ride, I think that, we had some interesting moments around like, oh, this is looking, shady AF, like, or whatever. Is there going to be a smoking gun on the backside of this? And then there's on the other side of it, it's like, damn, if we had been involved in this thing from the origin, then, we could be retired storytellers and never have to be in the position of taking on a story that we, from anybody ever, right? Like basically you could have just free rolled a production studio for life. And so, the scales that back and forth along that for months is an interesting place to be. No question. And ultimately, I think that the understanding of the crypto space is a phenomenally attractive, albeit landmine ridden landscape, right? And so, like it's I think that that's the kind of the truth of this is that at any moment when you're in that landscape and you're playing, like there is definitely an oasis that is to be found, but you're going to have to sidestep all the landmines on your way.
Yeah, it's one of those. It almost feels like and again, I have no experience in storytelling or otherwise, but when I look at it too, I always think, is it one of those, newspaper is going to write a story about you, we want to interview you, but that at the end of it, there's this betrayal of actually we found out the story that we want to go with, and it's not the one that's going to make you look best. I guess that's is there a way to apply that here too? Is there a way when you all are like, whoa, it's the other side's looking very interesting right now?
I think that the one thing that we always entered in this with was the idea of it being a fair shake. So the whole idea from the word get, and the thing that we heard from the community, and the thing that we as storytellers would always want to approach our work with is this needs to be fair, right? Like it can't be biased either way. We can't walk into this with an expectation of what the story is going to be one way or the other. And that we needed to create an argument that afforded everyone the opportunity to form their own opinion, that kind of followed that ideology of it's certainly not a do your own research, because this documentary isn't academic in that sense, right? But it is going to create in you unquestionably a desire to go Google. Now, what do you put in the Google search terms is to be determined in the way that you receive the film, right? But you can't not want to know more. Like that's like unquestionable. I think in the same way that like, I really feel like some of the most incredible experiences in watching this film will be in the 90-minute to 3-hour conversations that happen with friends and family, over coffee or at a drinking hole post film, sitting with people who have just seen the film and saying like, okay, let's talk, right? Because I think that like that to me is the thing that you're left with, is this like desire to want to communicate and just say, all right, let's work through this. And so, for me, that's very exciting as a filmmaker, because, I feel like this entire cryptocurrency space as a whole is one that should be deserving greater attention than it's being given by, my mom or my sons, right? Like that. I think that we should become more educated in that space than we currently are. And so that's what's very exciting about it. This to me is that I think that this is going to force that for a lot of people, like in meaning it's going to create a lot of interest, organic internal interest is going to draw people like a moth into the space, as opposed to hitting them overhead like a sledgehammer.
Whoops, sorry. Is that the highest calling, if you will, for a storyteller, to be able to create conversation, to either educate on issues one way or four? Like, how do you look at that?
That's it. Well, that's a really interesting question, because I think that it's specific to the filmmaker, and specific to the type of film that they set out to create, right? So like, if we think about the classics and you go, you think about like Jaws, or E.T., or, Good Will Hunting, and everything in between, right? The full spectrum, right? Like, and Spider-Man and all of these things. I'd say that it's hard to argue that that all of the goals of each of those films are in singularity, right? Like even conversation isn't always the goal of each one of those individual films. Now, if we just kind of say, okay, let's talk about documentary film, right? Okay. We can have a conversation around that. Now, within that pie, how many slices exist in terms of the goals of the filmmakers? And, unquestionably, there are some filmmakers, I would say more notably your Michael Moores, your, Spurlock, that type of, you could call it propagandist filmmaking, within the genre of documentary, has a more specific goal than just to create conversation, right? Like they're like, look, we want you to take on this line of thinking. But as it comes to each film that we do, we set about, these ideas of keywords, and that, the keyword isn't directly conversation, but can be framed that way, where the goal of our film, in this instance, in creating this, was we want people to want to know more. We want people to be curious. We want people to self-educate. We want them to get involved in learning.